Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us first thing for the Road to Sustainability, a journey with VMware. So I'm Vern Bolinius. I'm a lead cloud solution architect, as many of you know when I wear my daytime hat. But I'm also a member of the CTOA, the Office of the CTO, as an ambassador. And in that role, I've been focused on sustainability initiatives. And I'll start this morning with a confession. I am not a hardcore sustainability expert, but the good news there is it's caused me to have to go back and do a lot of learning, a lot of research, taking my own journey on the sustainability path, learning how we define sustainability, what it means to customers, how corporations are registering their own companies as, or to have them recognized as a sustainable entity or pursuing sustainability targets. How are those targets being tracked? What is VMware? What are we ourselves doing as far as our sustainability commitments concerned? And importantly, what are customers benefiting from, or how are they using VMware technologies to help them along their sustainability goals? So I know it's been said already, I want to keep this light, I want to keep this interactive. Feel free to take yourself off mute. We're a small bunch. I've got you open on my right here on my monitor. Feel free to take yourself off mute, ask any questions, and of course, if I can't answer a question, I will personally put you back on mute and simply carry on. Also, any feedback on this is welcome. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start by going back and defining sustainability, because if you look on the web, if you do any kind of Google search or look on Wikipedia, you'll find 50 different definitions or more of sustainability. So how are we actually going to define this? And then once we defined it, what do we focus on within sustainability that can be tracked? And again, sustainability has become a buzzword. If any of you, for anyone who hasn't been living under a rock for the past 10 years, which arguably might be environmentally friendly, so good on you, but there's so many different definitions, it's good to set the stage. So corporate targets, what are companies doing to set a target in line with some scientific principles, and how is that target being tracked? And what are the benefits? You'll see that from this as well. And then finally, as I was saying, what are VMware's commitments and what are VMware solutions doing to help customers meet their own sustainability goals? So with that, let me start with what exactly is sustainability. So again, you look on the net and there's a ton of different definitions, but when I was going back and again doing my due diligence, I liked one definition which was really very simple, and it's based on the daily rules, spelled D-A-L-Y, note not D-A-I-L-Y, although that might work as well. So the daily rules stem from a former University of Maryland professor, former chief economist for World Bank. So that's Herman E. Daly, and he based his theory, or he based his rules off theories from a Romanian economist back in 1971. So the interesting thing here as well is this has been with us for over 50 years. And we're only, or I guess exactly 50 years. And so we're only now really starting to act upon this, or actioning this. So three things. So again, these are simple definitions. To be sustainable, we look at renewable, non-renewable, and wastes. So renewable resources, things like, as the graphic depicts, things like fish or groundwater or forests, plants. To be sustainable, simply, you can't use up your renewable resources at a rate faster than which they can be replenished. Again, very straightforward. For non-renewable resources. So the classic example here is oil and gas. You can't use your fossil fuels, your non-renewable resources at a rate faster than they can be replenished by a renewable equivalent. Classic example, replacing oil and gas with clean energy, let's say wind power or solar power. The third one is along wastes or pollution. The earth can naturally absorb toxins. And so to be sustainable, you can't produce more toxins than the earth can naturally absorb. Now you can see that these three are interchangeable, right? So if you replace your non-renewable resources, for example, by renewable resources, So your coal power plant by solar power, you're not burning the coal, and so you're not generating the pollution. So that affects your wastes, right? Makes sense. So the three are interrelated. But when we have three things that are interrelated in the definition, what do we focus on as far as being able to report and track? How do we know how we're doing with our sustainability objectives? So if you look globally, there's a lot about CO2 emissions, and that's not a surprise. CO2 emissions or emissions, gaseous emissions, are the things that make sense to track, and you'll see that in all the reports. It's not just CO2, there are other gases that contribute to the greenhouse effect and global warming. You'll see that listed as CO2e or CO2 equivalent. So methane is a CO2 equivalent, for example. And happily, an event occurred back in 2015 that recognized global warming as a scientific reality. And I know there's some doubters out there, but we're going to go with this as a scientific reality, where 195 countries came together at the United Nations Climate Change Forum. And they formed the Paris Agreement. So 195 countries getting together, deciding that, yes, this is actually a problem. We should globally do something about it, because no one individual, corporation, or government is going to make all the difference. It has to be a combined effort. And so there were 4 key areas that were focused on or established as part of the Paris Agreement. So just as a little fun quiz, I'm going to put this up on the screen. So they focus on temperatures, a review mechanism, finance, and emissions objectives. So I've listed 4 of them, or I listed 3 of them here, each with 4 points. And I want you all just go to the chat to let me know what you think which one of these is correct. So temperatures is going to be below 2 degrees, 4 degrees, 1 degree. But in keeping with that, review mechanisms every 5 years, every 10 years. So we have 1 CEP, so temperature below 1 degree, review every 2 years. Okay, cool. Thanks, Michael. Just take a moment to read through and see what you think. I know it's a little bit to read, but I'll give you a sec here. B, okay. We have a C and we have a B. I was going to make this a Mentimeter, but then I figured if I put this in Mentimeter, it's just going to be too big of a chart. 2 C's and a B, cool. Thanks, Gareth. And die, route, or die, or die, route, die, depending on how you want to pronounce that. And a B, so B and C. Okay, thanks, Mark. Long time no see, Mark, by the way. B and C, okay. Cool, thanks, guys. So, in truth, it's actually A. So it's funny that everyone chose B and C. So no, it's A. So from a temperature perspective, the wider target is to keep temperature global warming below 2 degrees Celsius, review the results every 5 years. From a finance perspective, richer countries are expected as of 2021 to contribute to the sustainability initiatives of less fortunate countries. And from an emissions objective, aim for emissions to peak, quote unquote, as soon as possible. Now that's kind of vague, but as it turns out, there's definite financial incentive for them to peak sooner. And you'll see why as we go through. Okay, so that's a high level definition of sustainability. Agreement that we're going to focus on the emissions part, recognition by the Paris Agreement that, yes, this is going to be a global thing. So what has to happen then? How do you make that real? How does a corporation go and say, I'd like to be sustainable, I need to set a target, and that target needs to be in keeping with science, so it's actually making a difference, and how does that get tracked? And so how do we set corporate sustainability goals? I should pause. Any questions so far? Any thoughts or comments? All good? Not rocket science stuff. And again, this is part of a journey, like I said, that I took, moving through here and conveying the knowledge here and now. Don't have a lot of cameras up, so I can't see if you're checking the fire alarm because your kids made toast. But I'm going to assume that all is good. All right. So enter Science-Based Targets Initiative. Thanks, Carl. Enter Science-Based Targets Initiative, or SBTI. So this is a partnership between the World Resources Institute, the Carbon Disclosure Program, UN Global Compact, and the World Wildlife Fund, where they offer companies, so this is private sector only, so they offer corporations a very easy path to set and record objectives. So rather than put up slides on it, what I thought we'd do is let's actually go into sciencebasedtargets.org, give it a second to come up, and let's take a look at the 5 steps. Quick confirmation, making sure everyone can still see this on the screen. This is the 5 steps that should be up. Give me a nod or
I've got the Science-Based Targets Initiative on mine.
Yep, same for me.
Oh, it does. It doesn't say step-by-step process?
No.
No, I think you've still got the slide.
But the logos.
All right, so you're seeing this, yes?
Yep.
But not the other. Okay, well that's I can fix that. What I'll do is go to that where we just opened up the page. I will make it non-full screen, and then I will bring that. No, see, now you can see it, yeah?
Not yet.
Still a slide deck.
No.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, that's not very helpful. Not very helpful at all. How are we gonna do the 5 steps?
I think we had this issue before with the VMware presenter, I think.
Here, this is
Sharing.
straightforward. I'll just have to stop the share and then put this on the screen. I just don't want to stop the share because it's interruptive. Okay, then I'll get rid of this. So there we go. Okay, sorry about that. So 5-step process. It's fairly straightforward. Again, they're trying to make it easy for corporations to do this. So the first step is to, everyone can see this, right?
Yeah, we're still on the slide deck.
Are you
Okay,
just sharing the PowerPoint application instead of your desktop?
No,
Maybe.
I was sharing the, or I'll stop my share and reshare. I was sharing the screen, the desk itself. All right, let's try this again. Share screen.
I think we've had this issue with Macs before where there's a privacy thing that's caused all reams of chaos.
Yeah, but I mean, this is not the first time, obviously, that I've been sharing screens, right? We've been doing nothing but sharing the screen.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought.
You'd think, right?
All right, so share screen.
Too true, Alex, too true.
Wow, it really is just the, what do I do? Yeah, this is the first, folks. This is not I've never had can't share the full desktop. It only allows me to pick from amongst applications, not the full screen. Is this some weirdness of the way we're running Zoom here today?
It's VMware thing.
Okay. All right, no problem. We'll do this and then I'll just have to switch back and forth. Apologies. Right.
Nice.
So step-by-step process. So 5 steps, again, straightforward. Company goes and writes a letter to the Science-Based Targets Institute saying, I am going to commit to establishing a science-based target for sustainability. And at that point, they have 24 months to develop a plan in keeping with specific criteria, again, science-based targets. And then they submit that to the SBTI folks. This is not expensive, by the way. I should pause. When this is, as a nonprofit, the process of submitting for a large corporation is only 5,000 US. And that gives you 2 cracks at it. So if you submit your targets, they review it and they say, no, you need to change a few things. They give you some guidance. You go back, you change it, and then you fully registered, you fully submitted that action plan. So they put you up on their website so that you're acknowledged as a leader who wants to go down the path of sustainability. You then are able to communicate your targets and your plan to your stakeholders. So these are your internal, your external stakeholders, your investors. And then finally, you disclose on a yearly basis, an annual basis, the progress that you're making towards your sustainability goals. So 5-step process. And if we take a look at some of the companies that are doing that, and so if we go here and you say, let's look at companies taking action, and we'll pick a company. So let's say meet the companies. And let's go down to, where's my little search here? There we are. Let's use Nike as an example. So here's Nike's commitment on the Science-Based Targets Initiative. So Nike has chosen to go for the highest of the targets, the most difficult of the targets, keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And there's a big difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees. And if you click on View Target, you can see the details of their target. So in this particular case, Scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions, 65% by 2030 from a baseline in 2015. And so if you go through each of the companies here, and VMware's there, we'll get to that in a little bit, you can see what all the companies have committed to and how they're tracking. But from a tracking perspective, and this is where we have to do the screen unshare again. Where's my unshare? But if I do this, can you, hey, wait. Does that work? Can you see, or are you still seeing the, you're still seeing the previous share, aren't you?
Yeah, still seeing the
Okay.
web page.
Happily, it's a good web page, but that doesn't help us here. Let me reshare. Back to the PowerPoint. Again, sorry for the disruption. Okay, so once they've gone and they've registered their targets, the next thing to do is to have a method for disclosing them, a globally accepted method. And this is where CDP, or the Carbon Disclosure Project, comes in. So these folks are a nonprofit charity, and they run the global disclosure system, not just for corporations, so for the private sector. Remember, science-based targets is currently only for the private sector, but CDP will monitor and track for investors, companies, cities, you can see it there, city, states, so government, corporations, both private and public, and monitor their environmental impacts. And this is a really big deal. And the reason that it's a really big deal is because of this. If anyone thinks there's not a financial tag associated with this. So on the left, 110 trillion, this is in US dollars, 110 trillion US in investor assets. So this is the result of 590 investors. So these are large investment companies representing over $110 trillion who look to CDP for reports on their potential candidates for investment. So if you're a company that wants to attract investors, it is very much in your best interest to go register your plan, register your tracking with the CDP, with the Carbon Disclosure Project. So you can say, look how well we're doing, and up your stock price or up your investment. And this is very truly a KPI for many investors. They look to see how sustainability is going with their potential investees. The right side, 5.5 trillion. This isn't purchasing power. And so this is the case where, as a buyer, you have the choice from whom you buy. And if you're looking to be sustainable, you're going to pick someone from your supply chain or within your supply chain who themselves have committed to sustainability goals. And so in this case, so with 200 plus major buyers, they represent 5.5 trillion, and they're looking for suppliers that are going to be equally sustainable or having a sustainability mindset. So again, price tag associated with this, or financial gains associated with this. So what I'd like to do, I'm curious. So out there, what have you seen? If we go and we again stop our share here, and if I share my Mentimeter, which is going to be somewhere here, let's do this. I'll share this, and I'm going to bring in my Mentimeter slide. Do you see the Mentimeter, or does it need to be on the other screen?
On the screen,
Anyone? Okay. I can do that. Wow. So we'll go behind the scenes and my presentations. Within my presentations, let me bring up the one that I have for today. And let's play this. Right. So everyone just hop over to menti.com there and put in that code 644-7340, 6440-7340. And I've got three choices up on the screen. Again, I'm just curious as to what everyone out there is seeing. So within your own organization, has your company set a sustainability target? Do you have customers that have sustainability targets, or do you have both? So both your company and your customers have set sustainability goals. Okay, so 1 and 1. Okay, I'll give it a minute here for everyone to respond. I'm truly very curious here, because we see all different kinds of things. Many organizations, no matter how large or how small, have set sustainability goals. And by the way, the Science-Based Targets Institute makes it very easy for SMEs, so small and medium enterprises, to set sustainability goals, because first of all, they only charge $1,000 for it. And they also have a streamlined process. So you don't have to be a large organization like Nike or like VMware to set sustainability goals. You can do it at any point of size and organization. Okay, so company, customers, both A and B. Okay, interesting to see. I was very curious if we were going to get a lot of both A and B. Cool, thank you. Okay, interesting for all to see. Let me break out of this. Again, stop the share, go back to the PowerPoint. Sorry, folks. Go back to the PowerPoint.
Friends, Vern, it's all fine.
It's true, that actually is helpful. All right, so there's the Mentimeter. Right, so we now have the definition. We know we're focused on our emission side, our waste, our pollution. We know how to register our sustainability goals with the science-based targets. And we know that they're going to be tracked by the CDP so that investors and suppliers or buyers can go and take a look at that. That's great. So now how do you make it happen? You set this goal. How do you progress towards that goal? So for that, let me talk about two things. First, let me talk about what VMware has done as far as our commitments are concerned, as well as our roadmap, our progress and our track record, and then what VMware solutions are enabling customers to do to meet their sustainability goals. So remember I mentioned that we'd see VMware on SBTI. Now happily I prepared a slide for this because apparently it was going to be difficult to go back, stop sharing, bring that back up, search for VMware. So here it is. So VMware's on there. We also have shot for, or are shooting for and making progress towards the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, so the most strict target. And if you were to go and, as we set this goal in June 2020, and if you were to go into SBTI and click on the view target button, you would bring up that similar thing that we saw for Nike as far as what VMware has put down as their target. Now, what you'll see there, the type 1 or scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions, all of those are folded into or represented in our sustainability agenda. So VMware last year set something called 30 by 30, or 30 goals for 2030 along the lines of environmental, social, and governance. So a lot of you have heard the ESG term bantered about. And within the environmental, we have our sustainability agenda. And so within sustainability, we have 10 goals. So you can see them on here on the screen, everything from workload carbon efficiency, where we're helping customers with their carbon footprint, right down through sustainable.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No screen.
No screen?
No screen. Sorry, I didn't want to stop your flow because it was good, but yeah, the slides disappeared.
No.
I'm like Linda,
Stop the
who
flow.
straight in. Sorry, Vern, honey.
That's okay. That's okay. Let's try this again. How's that?
Perfect.
Beautiful.
Excellent.
Oh.
Excellent. This also gives me a chance to close my window because I swear that either the garbage disposal, which is ironic during a sustainability discussion, the garbage truck or the recycling truck comes and picks up, or they choose to cut the grass. But now I'll just sit here and roast. Don't mind me. If I melt, you'll know what's going on. Right, so sorry about that. So 10 goals. These are the 10 goals within the sustainability agenda under 30 for 2030, from workload carbon efficiency, distributed energy, right down through sustainable IT advocacy, in which we advocate for sustainable IT and public policy. I'll talk a little bit more about one of these as we go, but the link at the bottom here, so VMware 2020.com, oops, back up, the VMware 2020, VMware.com 2030 Agenda Sustainability. that has information not only on each of these, but also on some of the more rigorous details around how we're reporting to CDP, what the metrics are, the standards that are used. So it's actually interesting to see. It could be bedtime reading because some of the documents are 61 pages long as PDFs, but it shows that this is a very serious thing. So with this, a question then is, we've set these goals for moving ahead. How have we been doing? So what's our track record to date? Well, happily, it's looking good. I'm going to draw some on this again. This is, you can find this on VMware site. It is a little bit of an eye chart here, but what I want to do is bring some things to attention. Some of these are felling trees on your internet pipe. Ah, yes, there you go. So 1998 through to 2010. So this is just the first of two slides, but in this slide, this is everything from the inception of VMware in 1998. And a couple of things here I think are of interest calling out. So simple things that make a difference. So on the Palo Alto campus of VMware's headquarters, 750 windows installed. This is back in 2006. And the windows will automatically open and close to prevent the need for air conditioning in the buildings. Cool. Another thing, again, a small thing here, is the use of potato-based disposable utensils. Now, this is at the Palo Alto headquarters, which I think is cool in and of itself. But if any of you here have been to one of the VMworlds in the US over the years, and I don't know if we do this here in EMEA, in Barcelona, but if you were to go to one of the VMworlds in the US, we've taken this potato-based disposable utensils to VMworld. And so I paused a moment to think of that. I remember being surprised when I picked up my potato-ware, as it's called, and thought, huh, does it work? And sure, it works. But then you do the math. So roughly 20,000 attendees at a VMworld, 3 meals a day, call it for 5 days, rough math. That's 300,000 sets of utensils that don't wind up in a landfill. Again, pretty cool. All right. Next slide here speaks a little bit more to modern numbers and actual numbers. So back in 2011, the Palo Alto campus was already running on 100% clean energy. We just had a tree falling comment in the chat. Here's a tree planting statement. So this is back in, again, 2011, 2,500 trees. VMware is currently involved in a Reboot the Earth program where we are planting 1 million acres worth of trees. This is in the southern US. Again, very cool. Reducing water, so in the concept of reduce, recycle, reduce, reuse, recycle. But some of these numbers should also be focused on. So cumulatively over the years, you can see how this is going up. This is what VMware Technologies, to be fair, mostly virtualization, has done globally as far as avoidance of CO2. So from 2003 to 2020, there has been 1.2 billion metric tons of CO2 emissions avoided through VMware Technologies. And this was called out last year in an IDC survey. They're obviously forecasting here into 2021. But you look at the, here, let me build the slide out. You look at some of the numbers here. So again, cumulatively, which is what was in the other slide, 1.2 billion metric tons of CO2 avoided. Forecasting for 2021, 152 million metric tons avoided, and that represents 3% of the global CO2 emissions expected for 2021. And again, this is just through the use of VMware Technologies. So pretty cool. We have a good track record. We're making good progress, and we intend to make good progress as we go forward with our 30 by 30. Well, not everything is in the data center. We know this, right? So what can customers do to help themselves be more sustainable? The World Economic Forum put out guidance along 4 pillars. Again, not every change is in the data center, right? So 4 pillars: product and supply chain, zero waste and energy efficiency, reducing and recycling, and having key metrics and targets. So we take a look at product and supply chain. This goes back to that 5.5 trillion, where as a buyer, you can choose your supplier. And if you source ethically and responsibly, look for suppliers who themselves have sustainability goals, that goes a huge way towards your own sustainability initiatives. Zero waste. A great example of zero waste comes in Disney. We were talking earlier about going to Disney parks, but it turned out to be Legoland. But Disney. So Disney has decreed, this is a number of years back now, that all of their owned and operated franchises are not going to have straws, plastic straws. Again, it's hard to find a plastic straw now, but they led this. And they estimated that as part of that zero waste initiative, and you can look it up on their website, they have saved 175 million straws per year from going into landfill. They've done the same thing with coffee stirs, and now their hotels and their cruise ships have sustainable, refillable things directly in the rooms, and they expect to reduce the recyclables or reduce the landfill by up to 80%. So innovating around life cycles of resources. This speaks to using recycled material in your own product. And you can look no further here than your closest Starbucks, where pretty much all the cups of the coffee sleeves, recyclable material, it says so right on them, right? This is no surprise. McDonald's as well, recycled napkins, recycled, not using plastic straws like Disney. And so there's a big push to use recycled products to produce your products as a producer, as a manufacturer. This last one here is certainly not the least one. It's very big with the C-level. So the C-suite, to have sustainable targets, to have put sustainable targets in writing and be meeting those. Again, it's recognized that there's a big financial incentive here through investment as a KPI. So setting goals and being transparent in progress. So here are 4 pillars through which customers can focus to become more sustainable. So now the question on where can VMware help? Where can VMware come into play? Well, we can't come into play equally in all of these, but we can come into play in the zero waste category, the energy efficiency category, and the key metrics and targets. So let's take a look at some of these solutions. This is just one set of examples here. And so again, this is how you, as a VMware professional, can leverage VMware technologies for yourself or for your customers to aid in sustainability. So starting at the top, VMware Cloud Foundation and VMware Cloud. A large portion or a large gain in sustainability can still come from virtualizing the physical servers. We all know that there's still a lot of physical servers out there. Not everyone is virtualized. Many companies are. Not everyone will be 100%. I think we recognize that as well. But there's still tremendous gains to move physical machines to virtual machines. I'll use VMC as an example here as well. So VMware Cloud on AWS because of the example, not just because I'm VMC and AWS biased. So a recent report by 451 Research showed that Amazon data centers are about, on average, 3.5 times more energy efficient than the median of corporate data centers. And so what that means is if you were to shut down your data center, and of course we have a lot of customers who are doing just that, they don't want to be in the data center business themselves anymore, taking those workloads and moving them to, in this example, VMware Cloud on AWS, you are gaining efficiencies in energy consumption or energy reduction just by the move itself. Tanzu, you hear more about Tanzu from Robbie later on, but there's an argument that if you are taking your monolithic applications, you are refactoring them, you're re-architecting them, you are perhaps containerizing them, making them more efficient, there's energy gains to be gained from that. Workspace ONE, this one needs very little introduction here in this day and age of COVID, where home working has become a big thing, but you need a secure place for workers. Workspace ONE, securing the endpoints. And in so doing, and a lot of companies now that COVID is, I don't want to say it, I don't want to jinx it. Now that we're going back to normal, quote unquote, we are still finding that a lot of employers are going to let their staff, their employees work from home. And again, you still need that secure working environment. Workspace ONE comes into that. We're reducing the time spent commuting. We're reducing the emissions from cars, buses, et cetera, from from employees that are going into their corporations. So on the other side of the fence here, when we're talking about setting goals and being transparent in progress, I'm sure most of you are aware or know that vRealize operations can be used to right size a vSphere environment, identifying zombie VMs that are sitting there, just spinning up, never used, taking up CPU, taking up memory, burning energy. However, I also learned, and I didn't know this, that there is an actual dashboard for CO2 within vRealize operations. And so you can look to see what your CO2 levels are looking like and how much CO2 that you're using directly within vRealize operations. That was kind of cool as far as tracking. Cloud health. So cloud health was built to identify inefficiencies in public clouds. So if you were to turn cloud health onto a native Amazon data center, for example, or your native Amazon virtual private clouds, you'd easily see, and it points out, you could be gaining more efficiency and saving money by removing these, changing these out for these. So it's saving energy, saving money using cloud health. And then last on the list here, again, these are just some examples, Skyline and Wavefront to monitor your vCPH environment for potential problems down the road. That's Skyline. And Wavefront taking a look and providing millions of metrics on the efficiency of your actual applications. So these are some ways through sustainability innovation that VMware solutions can help customers meet their sustainability goals. Another example, we recently announced Zero Carbon Committed Initiative. This is a way by which we're taking customers and bringing them together with VMware cloud partners who themselves are focused on using green energy for their data center. So that's a Zero Carbon Committed initiative. And that actually fits perfectly into, you remember the chart I had up, the 10 in sustainability, part of 30 for 2030, that was goal number 6. And so helping customers reach that goal. And finally, we also have sustainability data sheets. And this is something that my group within the C2 ambassadors is focused on. We're producing sustainability solution data sheets around a number of VMware solutions that go into how that solution can be used in a sustainability context. There was also a number of other interesting things in the data sheets. There are links to carbon calculators. There are some useful impact stories. You can take this to your customers, or you can use it yourself, saying, look, in this particular case, vRealize operations, this is how we're adding to our sustainability goals or meeting our sustainability targets. With that, we're not quite at the end yet, but we'll have some time for a chat afterwards. So some sustainable takeaways. Setting and tracking targets. We talked about the Science-Based Targets Initiative, setting targets and then tracking those with CDP, remembering that there's a financial piece involved in this. So corporate KPI for many organizations and investors representing trillions of dollars. VMware commitments. So VMware has built sustainability, not just into our solutions, but I'm really happy to say it's taking root as part of corporate culture, like right up the stack, right up the chain from the CEO downwards, along with folks that are responsible for sustainability for environmental, social, and governance plans. We have our committed 30 by 2030 goals around ESG, and we have a great track record so far. And then as we'll just walk through some of those examples, helping customers meet sustainability goals with VMware solutions. So far from 2003 to present, VMware technologies have helped avoid 1.2 billion metric tons of CO2 emissions. We talked about gaining efficiencies through some of the points that I had mentioned before, SDDC consolidation, app modernization, using the vRealize operations example for tracking, and also workforce optimization through Workspace ONE. And through the Zero Carbon Committed Initiative, connecting customers with cloud partners who are focused on renewable energy, helping them with their sustainability goals. One question, why are we doing this out of VMUG? Why does it make sense to do this out of VMUG, having this discussion? And the answer is pretty simple. VMUG globally, we are 150,000 plus members in over 200 plus communities. What better place than to have a discussion around sustainability with VMware professionals who can bring that internally, but also spread the message to their customers and amplify the sustainability goals. So thanks everyone, not just for your time here today, but also thank you in advance for taking the message forward internally and broadcasting it to your customers. And that's it for me. Any thoughts, questions? Help take yourself off mute with apologies for our multiple back and forth. And like I said, I fessed up, I'm not a sustainability expert, but this was my learnings over the past, I don't know, 6 or 8 months as I've been focused on these. So I want some, if we still have a few minutes, if you don't mind, is it too simple? Are people looking for something more concrete, tangible? I know at VMUG, we normally have some deep technical discussions, and as a lead solution architect for VMC and AWS, I would normally be giving a deep technical discussion on VMC. So this is a slight departure from that. So what are your thoughts?
I'm happy to add something if that helps.
Yeah, please. Let me stop sharing here, because God knows we have troubles with sharing. Right.
Restart my camera as well.
Go on then.
So yeah, for me, again, I've kind of started going through this journey at home, and also I've done this with businesses in the past, building eco-friendly data centers and things like that.
Okay.
But one thing where I see that it's going to sound strange, I already see this evolving. Everyone's going on about sustainability.
Yeah.
But a lot of what I've done at home, everyone's like, why are you doing it? For me, it's more about self-sustainability, not just sustainability overall. It's all great.
I'm taking notes here. Okay.
For me, this is again going to sound like I'm going on a massive politics mission, but for me, it's great everyone being sustainable. But I hate to say it, I've even been involved in some companies where they say we're sustainable because we're buying green energy, we're offsetting here or offsetting there, whereas them themselves aren't being sustainable. They're not looking at their processes or things like that. I'm quite fortunate to have like a solar array here. I've gone for the electric cars. I've just had a heat pump. And mine isn't always about being as sustainable as possible, but of that percentage, how much of that can I be self-sustainable? Can I produce my own energy for use at home or my data center? Can I heat my home by using what I'm producing rather than importing from the grid? How can I it sounds a bit of an old way of doing it, but it's all great.
No. I totally approve. And I think that it's sometimes a small step that you take that can be, then if everyone did that one little thing, or everyone did one little thing. And again, I'm not preaching here. I just think and I had to look myself, and I'll fess up to one of the things I did from a sustainability perspective. And it's a small thing. Clearly I go and I use the old shaver and shaving cream. And a couple of months ago, I decided I wasn't going to use canned shaving cream anymore. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to use a little brush, the old school, get the lather going, and paint it on, and then shave it off. I haven't graduated to reuse or non disposable razors yet, but that's one small thing, and I haven't used a can of shaving cream since. So it actually saves money. That wasn't the impetus for it, and there's no the gas that's in the shaving cream, there's none of that, and I'm not having to worry about the recycling plastic cap or the metal, right? So it lasts far longer for far more shaves than a can of shaving cream. So again, it's one small thing. So I agree that self-sustainability at home, yes, definitely.
Even with businesses, when I've spoken to them about the kind of like when they're looking at things like solar and whatnot, it's looking at, I kind of use my house as a bit of an example. It models it really well, where I've got the battery and the solar. I charge up during the day, and that battery then alleviates my use of the grid at the most carbon intensive and also potentially sometimes the most cost times, because businesses, some business plans, they can, the power, what you pay throughout the day can go up depending on the busyness of the grid.
Oh yeah,
so
that's normal.
And that's what I'm saying to a lot of companies, like, by installing these solutions, it's great you got solar panels, but have you thought of batteries? And they're like, well, why? Because that costs us money. It's like, well, during those periods, you then can go essentially off grid and run your business on that green energy rather than exporting it to the grid, which can have a financial gain. Well, why don't you just store that for later and then use that when you can essentially then become more carbon neutral by using it at a later date.
So there's a big thing on that about the grid and how you get your energy. So nuclear's at the bottom, low CO2, but you cannot ramp it up and down very quickly. You know, so you end up with Chernobyl. So then you have things which are slow to ramp up and down. That used to be things like coal in the old days. Then you have things that are fast to ramp up and down, which are very cost negative, which is things like gas, which you do at the peak times, like when you have lunch and dinner, etc. But if you use the nuclear, which is CO2 low or renewables or something else, you can do things as they've done in Wales, which is, you know, pump a whole lot of water up a mountain into a lake and then release it through at the peak time of days. So you can offset things. So your water could be the battery, just potential energy. But one of the things that we all have is the way we consume. You say the grid. So we all look around, we look through the UK suppliers, and all of them have a green tariff. But what's that mean? If you actually Google around and have a look around, some of them are just buying credits from the Eastern Bloc countries. Hungary had an example where they were selling used credits. So we do have to look if it's really green and really renewable, or has somebody hidden it with some bits of paper.
Rick's kind of hit the nail on the head, and that's where, with all this stuff, you know, that's why I prompted the question about self-sustainability. Is that something businesses are looking into, rather than, you know, just going off and buying these green bits of paper to say we're sustainable?
Well, see, I totally agree with that. And that's another thing when we talk about carbon offset, right? Like, you know, if you go and you fly somewhere, you can pay dollars toward the carbon offset, which means the airline is going to invest in some program that plants trees, right? So that you balance that out. I mean, that's great, and good on you if that's what you're doing. But at some point in time, it can't be about offsetting. It has to be about not using it in the first place, right? Because there's only so much that you can offset, as opposed to, okay, we are simply ourselves saving water, not doing the burning either ourselves or from one of our suppliers. And so that's a key factor. So I totally agree with what you're saying. Well, we're almost at the oh, we have a break now though, don't we, Linda? Like, yeah. We're not okay. We can carry on. We're happy to carry on chatting. I just didn't want us to take us past the 11:45.
I was going to say, Percy, thank you for a great session. It's really interesting to see how you guys are doing it.
Thank you. I was first time I've run this, and I put the deck together a while back, and I just wasn't sure if it was going to be too simple, if I was telling people things that they already knew, or if there was material in there that made sense to go over. So, and tell me honestly, like, was it too simple? Should I be focusing more on metrics? Do people want to know more about the science behind it in a conversation like this, or is this just at the right level?
I think if you do this one, but then, you know, to almost have a comeback and do more detailed, but, you know, you introduced me, and I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody here, but you introduced me to a lot of things that I didn't know existed.
Okay,
website,
good, thank you.
Check that people are committing, and you could publicly see that. That's just, that's me not being inquisitive enough, probably, because if I wanted to, I probably could have gone and found it. But
well, but no, I mean, don't
together.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Linda, because what I've discovered is, as I was saying at the beginning, people throw the term sustainability around, but no one's actually gone and said, "Oh, okay, well, what do we actually mean by that?" And so I wanted to take that step back. So I'm glad that was helpful. Thank you for that feedback.
So that was my point on green tariffs. So people think ticker box, I've got a green tariff, and don't look any deeper. So your next step is, this is a green tariff, go and get one. Next step, how do we do it?
Yeah. You know, in fact, Page Gareth, he really does, you know, look into it and try and make his home as, you know, as green as possible. And it's definitely something, a lot of it is the convenience factor. Like you're saying, you're going from using the can shaving cream to back to, it's because the shaving cream is ready to go, right? It's much easier.
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of stuff. But it doesn't make it any worse or less, any worse as a product to be going back to the pods. So it's little things like that.
Yeah. Vern hit the nail on the head. You know, everyone thinks it's a massive ordeal. I'm probably that edge case, probably a bit like Joe, where we've gone a bit crazy and wild. But everyone can do their own little bit. You know, it doesn't take much.
Advocate it, live by it, and I think that's the great thing to do.
And one of the things about this chat, I mean, yes, I wanted to educate going back, but completely aside from an education value for it, the fact that people are talking, like myself giving this talk or others giving a talk on sustainability, no matter what the topic is or the detail is, the fact that more people are talking about it raises the awareness of sustainability, and that in itself has a positive impact.
That is it. And I think it's a following on from there, and we should probably try and do something for UseCon in November.
Like I say, I'll
okay.
be well up for a follow-up, you know, even like a bit of a deep dive if you can in some way.
Yeah.
Am I
even
getting
if there's
sucked
any
into
case
something
studies.
here? Am I getting sucked into something here that
yeah.
I feel it coming on?
25th of November, are you available? Because, you know, you really need to start planning that. But I think it's,
I will commit to a follow-up session.
yeah, I think still keep a high level for those who've obviously not seen this, but then go into, we'll meet with it for a broader audience. And I just think it will be, we're really looking to put more than just tech sessions on, as you've seen. You know, we're really trying to support on the mental health side of things. We need to be very aware, working with in the industry that we are, about sustainability and how we're contributing to climate change. And I think it's a really good topic.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
Thanks for reaching out, putting it in front of us is good.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you had a slot available, and I'm looking forward to, to UserCon and being able to actually stand on a stage and speak to real people. Not that you're not all real people. I'd like to clarify.
Here's another
I mean, to me, I think it's interesting to see how some of the background stuff. I mean, you know, the organisation I work for are quite, financial services, right? So they're quite committed, or starting to see that green agenda trickling all the way down into everything. But you start to see it now, and I guess now it has some regulatory teeth behind it as well. It's now starting to inform who gets investment funds, for example.
Yeah.
And that's really what starts to drive behaviour, unfortunately, because that's the hard reality, the stick, as it were.
Well, you see, you know what? That's okay though, Simon, because I agree. It is the hard reality, and that is what drives it. But the fact is that is driving it, right? Like now folks are starting to tune into the fact that there is a financial price to pay if you are not as sustainable as your neighbor or as your partner or as your competition. Mm-hmm. They're going to be selected before you because there's money that's associated with it. And that's what it takes to move it. So be it. So
I've got one from the VMware user group level. So if we go back to our home labs, go back 10 years ago, we had DL380s and we had some spinny Rust racks and all the rest of it. You could probably look at £800 a month in electricity bills. I can see, people like Gareth who have got the home labs initiative, whatever, people are actually boasting about how many watts their SSDs and their NUCs and whatever are doing. We've reduced our footprints just as a VMware user group to a fraction of what we were doing a decade ago. And that really hits you in the pocket.
Yeah, well, you joke, I spin up parts of my lab when I need it. So I've got some higher end hosts when I need the performance. If not, you think of the NUCs, they are brilliant. They can consume as little as 15 watts versus 300-400, keep going depending on what I've got loaded.
A DL3 is about 1.5 amps roughly.
I've got a couple of shuttle servers, and so no fan. They just let the heat out through the metal base. Only 32 megs each, though, which is an issue. So I also have a Dell thing that sounds like small airplane taking off, and a couple of other Dell servers which I generally don't ever turn on. But yeah, so ramping. I'm with you. Ramping stuff up as you need it.
Do you think that fits well with the hybrid cloud philosophy? Do you reckon more businesses will go that way? They'll have some stuff on-prem or premises, depending on, I'm going to get lynched, to then, bursting out to the cloud. Do you see that becoming a more standardized thing?
We have seen that already again, I'll speak to my history with VMware Cloud and AWS. We certainly have seen that. Some examples. So we were talking about telecom earlier. So 3 UK is everyone knows provider within the UK, and their story was that they had a bunch of developers and they needed infrastructure quick because everyone's on a race to 5G. And I'm not telling anything out of school here. They've gone at VMworld and spoken about this. And they had the developers lined up. They didn't have infrastructure. They desperately needed infrastructure, and their incumbent provider was going to take 3 months to provide the team with infrastructure. And I mean, the developers there literally sitting there. And so this wasn't acceptable. And we had a chat with them around what VMware Cloud AWS could potentially do with them, have the right people at the table who understood the solution, who understood what we were trying to achieve. And 8 days later, they had their first SDDC stood up and the developers were working. Right. So that was a classic example of bursting through to cloud. And so, yeah, I do absolutely see some, and that's just one example. So I absolutely do see more of that coming down the pipe.
Yeah, but I think particularly certainly working with a lot of the public cloud providers, right? Because that cost is now much more transparent and generally directly billed back to the business. I mean, I've certainly seen, for example, where in the old days, you could never switch off development systems because, they never knew, or they never knew the impact. And really, the reality of it is they never looked at what complexity it was, and it was someone else's problem buried in a budget line somewhere else. Now they're directly paying the cost of keeping those development servers up 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I see a lot more of those now being actually only spun up for 8 hours a day and actually proactively spun down at the end of the working day for those regions, because they are picking up and they see that direct bottom line rather than it being a financial shred across the whole organization.
Well, another example is when you have bursty traffic. So I work with IPTV, and the way it works is, you have a little bit during the day, the kids come home, there's a little bit of a spike, it goes down because they have their tea, a little bit as they go before bedtime. But 9 o'clock, when the kids are in bed, whoosh, on demand goes through the roof as mum and dad, it's 1 o'clock, let's put a movie on and just relax. So what you do is you use things like VROps to trigger your load, spin it up in the cloud, do the demand from there, and then you do the fast up but slow down at midnight when everyone goes to bed. And it's better to hire your peak demand for 2 hours than run it in-house at peak for 24 hours a day. Save millions for my particular client. So hybrid.
And and arguably, I mean, since we're on the topic of sustainability, arguably you're not using the power all that time, right? So it's not just a cost savings, it's an energy savings.
Yeah, only a 12th of the mountain power. Yeah.
And I'm seeing your note here, put out a survey to UserCon, have people thinking about certain aspects of sustainability prior to. That's a good thought. Thank you.
That's Linda on the phone to her energy supplier now, doing a lower tariff.
So don't worry, I was going to say I'm offsetting you at the minute because I'm pushing 1.2 to the grid. So if you're
that's
pulling
right,
in,
so we're carbon neutral.
Yeah, I saw that.
so it's all right. I just oh no, now I'm pushing 2 to the grid, so you're fine.
Oh, sorry, the 1.1.
I'll spin my blades up. Hang on.
That's all right. It's creeping up. I'm up to 3.5 to the grid now. The sun's come back out. So I'm
I had heard. You can confirm this for me. So I'd heard that energy companies are happy now, or this is perhaps a paradigm shift. They're happy to have you sustain yourself, but due to technical complications, they're not letting people push up to the grid, or new new users pushing up to the grid. Is this true?
There's limits. It depends on the area. I originally the guys know my background here. I always wanted the system I had now, or very close. Originally, I was going to have close to, I think it was 12 kilowatts of solar, and my local grid just freaked out. Absolutely just threw kittens and went, no way in hell.
Why?
Because they were so scared that I was going to export loads, and believe it or not, it's kind of like a back pressure. Putting too much on the grid can then cost them money.
Okay.
The irony is they've now built 2 solar farms in my area and came back to us not so long back saying, "Are you sure you don't want the full amount now?" I was like, "Yeah, you sods." So I compromised and redesigned the system. So we have about 8.5 on the roof, and we can peak. So at any peak, we can produce 6 safely to their terms. But then we've kind of proven to them, we again, go to the point of self-sustainability. Until we've gone to a recent tariff, most of the summer last year, we were running completely off grid. I'm pushing very little back to the grid, We have smart chargers here that I can dump even more into the car. So at one point, I was generating 1 month, I think we did 1.2 megawatts in a month. And we only exported just shy of, I think it was about maybe 1,000 kilowatts of that. So less than a percentage of it I put back on the grid. The rest of that I dumped in cars. I used to heat my hot water. I used to run the house, and I consumed as much of that as I could.
And that's all solar?
And that's all solar. So shows that it can be done. It just takes a little bit of a mind shift.
Yeah, again, I wonder about it at the cottage in Canada. The problem, of course, is the snow, right? And so it's going to get, especially since the cottage isn't used in winter, it's the panels are going to be covered with several feet of snow for most of the winter. And I don't know what that does from a damaging perspective or how things can be covered up. I'd have to do the investigation, obviously.
Well, use some of your stored electricity to heat the panels and melt it off.
Well, that's it. Some of the panels now do have a small element that kind of heats them off, and again, that's why, everyone says to me, you want to be 100% sustainable. I was like, no, that's kind of an unrealistic target, especially living in the UK and like Canada. We have rubbish weather. There is no way, even if I increase my rate, I'd be able to sustain myself during the winter. It's just not feasible. So I found that happy medium of having the battery that I can charge in, low carbon times. So I can take it off the grid when it's low carbon, and then that can run the house when there's no solar. So it's again finding this mix of energy that works well for us. So there are points with the amount we export during the summer. I know that will probably have enough that is what I import back during the winter, and it kind of balances out a bit, if that makes some weird and backwards.
No, that makes complete sense. Yeah, I sometimes do wonder. I mean, here in the UK, like when I look out the window now, so I'm in London. When I look out the window now and it's grayish, and I see, as we were driving back from Wales last week, you see some solar farms along the where were we, M4, and I think how does that work given the amount of time that it's overcast here? But apparently it does.
Yeah, mine's working right now, so fine. Who's up next, Simon? So I can make them co-host.
So we've got Gareth up next.
But most of the UK demand for electricity is during the day when it's sunny.
Well, folks, I unfortunately need to drop off. I would love to stay. Thank you all for being a great audience and not booing and hissing while we did the multiple stopping and restarting shares. I honestly did not see that coming.
You should know for next time when you're going to.
I will know for next time. All right, folks. Thanks very much.
Thanks
Thanks so much, Vern. Take care.